I can get started again. The next item that we're going to talk about is the budget, and we're going to have conversations in regards to the budget. I just want to clarify, I think our city clerk said that this was not an official meeting. It is an official meeting. It's just a special meeting.
It's a special work
Correct.
session. We do roll call at actual council meetings. We never do roll call at the work session.
We haven't in the past.
We haven't
Correct.
in the past. I
Right.
took down the names, but yeah.
So with that, I'll go to Ike Holland, our city administrator.
Mayor and council, I was sick last week, and Monday night this meeting was proposed, and then Tuesday morning I went in and I got sick, and then I went home. So I never had a chance to talk to the mayor about the presentation tonight. So over the weekend or the holiday, I thought of a few things that we've talked about over the last couple of months. Some items as far as budget and the cost of doing different things. And, I do try to point those things out in my weekly update if we've went over or under on a particular project. Tonight, I asked our finance director to come up and basically just to give a real brief update on 2017, how we're doing, and I know that Councilmember Nelson had asked for an updated list on our capital projects, so you can see what we've spent so far this year and what we have not. And then we've got about a half a dozen items since September that we'll have for consideration of changes for our budget that we have on the agenda for December 4th. And so I wanted him to just to point a couple of those things out. Now, I also had online our Public Works Director and our Parks Director to talk, Parks and Rec Director to talk about some of the playgrounds and the parks and where we're at on that. And then I also had our planning director to talk about the airport taxiway project. So these are some things that I have lined up, but I know that the mayor had talked to me this afternoon, said that he had a couple questions that he wanted to be brought up, and maybe there's some other council members, so we can gladly do that and talk about some of those budget numbers. So with that, unless there's any other changes, we'll try to go through this kind of briskly. I've asked our finance director not to go 30 minutes. We're going to keep this short and brief, and if you have any questions, please stop him and ask him to clarify or expand on that. So, Steve?
But we're talking about the 2018 budget, correct? That's what we're talking about?
Well, I asked him first to talk about 2017, but if you don't want to talk about that, we can just go on to the 2018. I was just going to have him refresh. No?
What does the council wish to have done? I mean, we had an update at the last council meeting in regards to the finances, but do we want to hear 2017 stuff or 2018 stuff? What do we want to do?
Just,
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
You're prepared,
I'll keep my 17 comments real brief. You are correct. We did review the operational in 17 at the last council meeting. There was discussion about the capital improvement, that hadn't been to the council for a while. Some of that is scheduling with the finance update reports and the work sessions running longer. And so we will have an in-depth and have that updated both for the operating and the capital at either the December 4th or December 18th meeting. That's normal process. What we look at is that we do send out monthly reports to the departments and ask them to review them throughout the year. We get to November, we send them a budget, or we send them a calendar telling them that when we like to have items submitted. One of those is submitting things daily so that they can have an idea of where they're at on their budgets, the current year budgets. And so December is kind of a month that we kind of bring everything together and watch and make sure that if we're finding some areas that need council action, we bring it to the council in December. So that's kind of a normal process. So that's where we're at in 17. 18, the council, if you recall, back in May, set up a budget calendar We did try a little bit different this year with Mr. Holland here, as far as what's provided to the council, working with the mayor and his presentations and those types of things. After our presentation in September, I did have 2 questions from a couple council members. One was an item that was in the non-departmental revenue. It had to deal with the Rice Care Center, and that was revenue neutral. There was an item in the non-departmental and the revenue, so they washed out. Now with the activity of Centricare or with Caris Health, that item will kind of go away and will be revenue neutral, so we'll take care of that. The other item or other question I had was dealing with the engineering department in that in 16 and 17, there were a couple large numbers in their maintenance of other improvements. That had to deal with the signal system, and that was moved out of the capital process into the operating because that's something they do annually. So I did supply that information. Those were the only 2 questions that I got. The list that I have in front of you, again, are items that have been sent to the finance office for further discussion, either tonight or at the December 4th council meeting. And again, those are just items that either have been sent to my office or discussed. Other than that, everybody had received the detailed information of all the different various funds. Our major discussion had to deal with the operating side and just the general operating, but there are many others, including waste treatment, which you were discussing earlier in the meeting. And again, those rates are set through 17. There is no need to look at those as far as adjusting them for 18, but the discussion will go forward in 18. As many budgets, the only action, there will be 2 actions on the December 4th council meeting, unless you take some amendments and those types of things. Those 2 actions will be to set the total budget by resolution, and to, well, first action will be to set the levy. And as we've discussed, you can lower it. You just cannot increase it from what was set at your September meeting. The second action then will be to adopt the total budget, with including all funds. So with that, I'll answer any questions, or we can go to the next person.
Just a quick question. In our, on our, I want to call it iPad, or the budgets, they're all dated September 12th, all the items in, are they current? I don't have my book with me tonight, but we've got them on our computer. Are they all current? Is September 12th correct?
I guess I'm not
Yes,
sure what you're referring to. I'd have
He's
to.
talking about the budget
The
document.
budget hasn't changed.
The budget document.
The
Budget
budget documents distributed in September have not changed,
Okay.
other than that list that I presented to you tonight.
That was my question. Thank you.
So we have the 6 things that has been presented to staff to consider in changes that we as a council have not addressed. Councilmember Nelson.
I'm not sure how we're proceeding here, but with the auditorium, I know we got an email regarding the lighting. I assumed that we were changing the light bulbs, but are we changing the lights? Because I mean, we had money in the CIP several years ago, like $100,000 or something, to do the lights, and the figure you had was like 17,000. So I'm just curious with where we are with that, and I guess the other thing too is we don't have open items that we didn't do in the capital improvement program prior to this year. I know Mr. Oken sent out the list for this year, but we don't have a running like total of what we didn't do in 14 or 15 or 16. And I know some of those carry over, some don't, but I'm in particular curious about the auditorium.
Well, Sean, could you first just give a brief recap of what we're doing on the lights, and then we'll follow that with Steve, and he can, maybe we can come out with a more detailed Excel spreadsheet that goes back a couple of years, as you referred to. But Sean, if you would.
So, Councilmember Nelson, the 100,000 you're talking about, I think was 110, if I remember right. That was ceiling and lights combination. That was the original staff proposal. That was originally in the CIP process. Over the course of the last few months to a year, The projects for the auditorium have been removed, cut, otherwise asked not to pursue, and so we didn't. Now, when this came up again this time, we said, well, let's just do the lighting because of the recent additional comments on the lack of lighting or the lights continuing to fail in the auditorium. And so we separated out from that dual project, if you will, the ceiling and light project, just the lighting portion, which is what the 17,000 number is in front of you. 17.5 is what I have written down here. To just replace the lights, leaving the ceiling as it is for the time being.
Okay. So just to verify, I thought the lights were the total. The ceiling was included in replacing also?
Correct. Ceiling and lights, and I think it was 110.
And what year was that?
I
This
want to say
year.
that was, no, I think
No.
originally it was like 15 or 16. 16, and then it's at least one carryover. So probably 16 and then carried over to 17 because it did not happen in 16.
So that money still hasn't been spent and is just there?
Steve may have to help me a little bit.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, included in that capital improvement should have been in the last section, should have included any kind of carryover dollars of 16.
In which part?
No, it would have been in the monthly that was sent out, attached to an email on the capital report. The first part would have been the vehicle, the second part would have been 17, and then the last page should have been the carryover dollars, which included some fire truck and the ceilings that are being requested or talked about. Historically, the city used to carry over more than 2 years, but that direction was given to staff that it be spent in the current year or the following year, or it would be reallocated during the budget process. So we do only carry over 1 year at this point.
Right, and that was by council action.
Yes, sir.
So before they had basically 4 years to spend the money. We've narrowed that down to where they have 2 years
Okay.
to spend the money. That answer your question? Councilman Nelson?
I think so.
Okay, next we're going to who?
At this time, Sean, if you would come up and just give a brief summary on some of our projects.
Mayor, members of the council, I've got a quick spreadsheet here, and I don't know how much detail you want, so I can go through the projects one at a time and ask for questions, or go through the list.
Just brief.
Brief. I got one page. That's it. Briefly, 2017 improvement projects, which would be our streets, was estimated at just shy of $3.5 million. The bid came in just under $3 million, so there's a savings of almost $500,000 there. Cost to date is $2.4 million. Rice Park, we estimated and or budgeted just over $800,000. The bid came in at just under $840,000. Miller Park, we've estimated $380,000. The bid came in at $340,000. Playground equipment, we estimated $100,000. Bid came in at $101,000. Auditorium lighting, as mentioned earlier, the estimate was $20,000. The bid came in at $17,500. Gun range estimate, bid, and cost to date all was just over $50,000. The tuck pointing estimate was at $100,000. The bid came in at $274,000, so that did not happen. Refrigeration project, second. Oh, separate that out. So the refrigeration project, we estimated $3.2 million. The bids, the lowest possible choice to do would be 2.6 or 2.7, but then we have to add $200,000 for engineering.
So 2.8?
Brief enough?
Okay.
2.8. Actually, the proposed staff recommendation would be still that 3.2 for details that we can provide at any time asked. Oh, and the other note I've got here is that we robbed from the tuck pointing project money for the gun range cleaning services by council action. That's as brief as I got.
Okay.
What was the third
Councilmember.
item?
Questions?
The third item you had on there? I missed it. What was
Miller Park was the third one I mentioned,
what the
or,
next
or
one?
playground equipment.
It was after Miller Park.
Playground equipment.
And what were those numbers?
We estimated 100,000 and the bid was 101.
Okay.
And I'm rounding here. I've got actual to the penny here, but
Sure.
Sean,
that was really quick, sorry.
Mayor Calvin, members of the council, if I could just, Sean compiled some numbers, and we didn't get a chance to look at them together this afternoon, but the playground equipment in Miller Park are being somewhat meshed together there, because the equipment that is going into Miller Park is in the Miller Park numbers and stayed inside the playground equipment numbers, so there'll be an adaptation to that.
So the 100,000 includes the money for Miller Park and for the playground equipment at Miller Park? Is that what you're saying?
I'd say that the 340, I think, was the number Sean used for Miller Park, includes the playground equipment, which is in the neighborhood of $50,000 for that park, and the playground equipment that goes into a park to be named is in the $45,000 range. So together, we spent about $100,000 on playground equipment.
Councilman Nelson?
Just further clarification on that. I thought we were only able to buy playground equipment for one park, and that's 45,000? And
addition
so
to
then
Miller.
review the Miller Park numbers with the playground equipment.
The Miller Park numbers I gave you, the 340,000 includes 50,000 in playground equipment.
So then did we not spend all the playground money?
No, then we spent 50,000, again rounding, 50,000 on playground equipment to be placed at a yet-to-be-named location. Is that what you were saying?
Correct.
Does that make sense?
What,
So half of that playground money goes to Miller Park, half to be named at a later date.
except I thought when we took the action that we were only able to buy one piece of equipment for one park to be determined. So the numbers didn't make sense to me, but that's a different question, I guess, so.
You're right. There is one park that we have purchased equipment for that we have not placed yet.
But
One
it's like $40,000?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, ballpark.
All right, thank you.
Do we still have a $45,000 extra for another park?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, was that question at me?
Anyone, I mean, because
Of-
if.
The numbers don't.
No,
I thought we
of
had
that, of that,
$100,000 for parks, but if you're taking 50,000 for Rice, and that's coming out of the Rice budget.
No.
And you have 45,000
Miller.
out of the 100, or Miller Park, sorry, but then the 45 is for a park yet to be determined. But I thought we had $100,000
Right.
for,
so let me redo these, okay? So Miller Park, 340,000, includes playground equipment.
Okay, so then. are we
Playground
gonna
equipment,
take that-
50,000,
So playground equipment is revamped to 50,000.
correct. 45,
45.
yep. Apologize.
Okay, Steve Okens, our finance director. Can you go over the amendments we made to the budget after the retreat? Do you have that with you by any chance?
Mr. Mayor, for those council members that received the capital improvement report that we were mentioning earlier, those numbers are on there. There was $365,000 originally budgeted for a concession stand at Swanson Field. There had been some money spent for design work, and so there was $330,000 that was remaining, that was reallocated by Council Resolution 17-93. Of that $330,000, $150,000 was transferred or reallocated to Miller Park. Of that $150,000, there was an amount in there for playground equipment. I believe it was either 40 or 50,000. I'd have to research that. I don't have that with me tonight. There was $90,800 that was remaining after all the other reallocations, and I can scan through my report here, that was remaining for playground equipment for filling those items that had been removed due to safety reasons. And it's in the report that was sent out to the council based on the end of October. The other item that we were discussing about the ceiling and the lights, there was $20,000, and it's on the last page of the report. $20,000 budgeted in 16 for the lighting and $110,000 for the ceiling in the auditorium. It's all in the report that was sent out.
I see a lot of tongues being bitten. Councilmember Nelson.
I'm not doubting the playground numbers. I can't get them to add up in my head, even with what you just said. So what did we have in Miller Park? What did we add to Miller Park? And what did we have in the other ones? Because it feels like we're missing some money.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nelson, there was originally $220,000 allocated for Miller Park to remove tennis courts. There was $150,000 added to the Miller Park for a grand total of $370,000 allocation.
Okay, where did the 380,000 come from then? It was just rounded up?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there was not only $330,000 allocated from Swanson Field, but there was $127,000 reallocated from the airport. It's all in Resolution 17-93.
If somebody gets those numbers to add up, would they like to share them? Because I'm still lost. And I don't want to make it a big deal.
Okay, I'm going to task our city administrator with reconciling those numbers for us, get them back to us in an email.
Okay.
Can't we like do it on the board?
No, we're not going to do that tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Holland will get that information. He will work with the 3 staff members plus himself. He will get it to us, and we will know how much money is remaining. I believe what everybody is saying here is there's additional dollars remaining. Somewhere. So we'll get that worked out. That'll get to us, and then someone will give a very brief update on that on the 4th, so that the public is aware of how these numbers figured out.
Okay.
Our next report is, I'm sorry.
Can I email them out though first?
He'll get that done, he'll email them to us, but there'll be a brief report at the council meeting, the beginning of the council meeting, on what that is. Actually, it'll be during the city administrator's comments at the end of the meeting, is when he'll recap that for us.
Okay.
Is there any question on the direction?
No, I have it. Thank
I
you.
thought so. Thank you. Okay, next we're having an update from,
Bruce, could you just briefly?
and then we'll get to the 2018 budget.
Mayor, members of the council, first brief report will be on the East Taxi Lane Reclamation Project, the private hangar area that was completed in October. The final walkthrough was on October 25th. The original project estimate was at $297,359, and Swenson and Sons of New London was the low bidder on that project. There was a change order approved by the council on November 6th for $7,782, and that was for additional piping for surface drainage. And there will be a second change order coming to the council for $20,000 due to additional bituminous paving required to match the hangar aprons and some additional restoration of grass areas greater than what was originally estimated. Final construction cost for the project will be $325, $184.26. The split is 90% federal, 5% state, and 5% local. So the city's share is approximately $15,500 for that work. There has been one payment made to Swenson and Sons totaling $280,714, and pay estimate 2 will be processed once the second change order is approved by council, and there will still be a 5% retainage being held by the city. We have a 1-year warranty for that project.
Bruce, on that, just a second. So what amount was budgeted for that, Mr. Okins? And then what was the amount that was, because we only paid the 5%?
Could you restate your question, Mr. Mayor? I was working on trying to get you a breakdown of your $457,000 allocation. I apologize.
On the east taxi lane, so in the budget, we originally had budgeted far greater than that, or Bruce, maybe you have that number?
I don't have it in my head. I'm pretty sure the project came in under budget, though.
Well, it was way under budget, right? We only had to pay 5%, but we'd budgeted the majority of it.
Mr. Mayor, there was $127,000 of this amount that I'm working on that was reallocated out
Right.
of the airport.
Correct. But there was still a remaining balance of that as well. Go ahead.
Okay. Secondly, a very brief update on industrial park transactions, and these have to do with the third and fourth editions, and that's the portions of the industrial park that are immediately east and west of County Road 5. The city's completed land sales for the following businesses: Dooley Brothers, Berg's Fabricating, Magnum Trucking, and Backus Telecommunications. Pending sale includes the ISCO property, and that's Bueller Manufacturing. I'm working with Candy Abstract and Title. We should have that closing done within the next couple of weeks. And we have currently proposals on the table with a major dairy processor and a large medical manufacturer who are both looking for large tracts of land out in that industrial park. And it's taking a long time for them to get to through the decision-making process, but the city of Willmar still remains one of the top contenders for both those projects.
Thank you. Did we want to know what the revenue was on those industrial parks? Does anybody remember?
I thought that's what he was going to give.
Mr. Peterson, do you have the revenues on those sales?
I would rather provide them to you in writing than guess at this time. I can come close, but I can get you that information in an email.
Okay.
You want to know the sale prices?
Revenue side,
You
yeah.
want to do the revenue side of it, right? Wasn't that the question that was asked? Mm-hmm. Right. So they want to know the revenue side. And so I think, as I remember the question, they want to know what we invested, so what we did with local option sales tax, and then now what is our return on that investment we made, was how I remembered the question framed when it was asked the last time. Okay.
Also looking for the net after the application of the land write-down, or just the sale price itself?
I believe it was net. I believe it was the net.
If we have both, we'll be able to
Yeah.
figure out the net, yeah.
Well, we should be able to.
Yeah.
I will provide that in a format that's somewhat intelligible, so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Somewhat is the key word.
Isn't, okay.
And where am I going next?
Now we can go to the 2018 budget.
Perfect. That's where I wanted to get.
Okay.
Okay. So when I handed the budget off to the council, I had recommended that if the council chose not to do an increase in the levy, that we could potentially cut the fuel system out at Public Works. And I instructed staff to do the research on that. My understanding is staff has done that research, and I'm not sure if Mr. Holland's going to prepare that and deliver that, or if somebody else is going to, but the short of it is that that's not going to work with the way we do business. So I don't know if you want to expound on that.
I
Mr.
think
Holland?
if council has further questions, I can ask our Public Works Director or our police or fire chief to speak on the issue, as far as they have some of the largest fleet. But basically, the question was put out to all the staff, and primarily those with a large fleet, and whether it would be practical to go away from, the private pumps that we have down at Public Works. And so the answer came back unanimously that that would not be the best situation for, Public Works or the fire department or the police department. So the preference would be to keep the current system as is.
And then another question that had been brought to me subsequent to that was that on the land application of our sewage sludge, is that we have a semi in the budget. And could that be considered? And so that was thoroughly vetted today, and it is staff's recommendation that we not use that either, because we have approximately 250 acres of land that is sewage is applied to, with the permitting processes that it takes to do that, and how we currently operate that to get it in before freeze up after the crops are taken off, it would make it very difficult for those farmers to continue to receive that. I think I'm paraphrasing that correctly. I don't know if somebody wants to add to that or not, but that was not a recommendation either to do, so that we should leave that vehicle in as well. So if I missed something there, somebody can fill me in on it, but I think I kind of hit the high points, I believe. So staff's recommendation is we stay with that as well. So those were the two things that had come to me as possible solutions of not raising the levy. So where we're at is to talk about anything you want to, talk about revenues, talk about expenditures, those types of things on the budget. And then from that point, Mr. Okins identified that we would need to have two motions that would come to our meeting, and that it would either be on the 4th or the 18th. We could make it at either of those two meetings to make the intent of the law. So, Councilmember Nelson.
I just wondered if you could just share a few of the obstacles with that fuel system. What would be the main reasons why you couldn't do that?
I think, and I've done it both ways in different communities. I think when you have your own pumping system and you have it set up the way they do at Public Works, number one, you're never interfering with the public. So there's never a conflict with private vehicles. Number two, the inflow and outflow at that current facility is very easy for our large vehicles. Even when they pile up, you can get back to back and you're not causing any type of congestion or anything. Number three, the fuel price is pretty competitive, and it would not decrease our price if we were to switch over to a private company. So that's kind of a cost basis effort. I don't know, is there what other primary reasons besides those top three that I'm forgetting? Anyone want to mention that?
The other thing that was brought up was during a state of an emergency, we would have access and not have to be in a restricted position.
It does, and you can, in Missouri, we had a gas station that would set up in the state of an emergency and not service private vehicles. But that was his own choice to do so. But it is true that the mayor's point is very valid, that in a snowstorm or a tornado or a flood or something like that, you're not going to have private citizens drive out to the Public Works building and try to get in line to fuel their vehicle. And so it makes practical sense to have that, especially in emergency management type situations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you,
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming that the county and the state DOT have the same system where they're pumping their own fuel, and wouldn't it be prudent to have those three come together and have one station somewhere? I mean, just for future thought. I mean, we should do the same thing with salt and sand. I mean, it's all coming from taxpayers, and it just makes sense to, if they would have one fueling station somewhere, it would probably have 3 times the amount of fuel, and just makes some sense to me. But maybe that could be for future discussion.
And I can investigate that here. Every, town and county and every state is a little bit different. And I agree with you, whenever you can combine, resources like that, you can usually get a better price, a better product, better quality and all that. But I've never encountered that in my travels where I've partnered on fuel. And now I've partnered on buying sand and chemicals. And I've been able to, even fleet vehicles, where we've purchased multiple vehicles at the same time from the same manufacturer, and I've been able to save 5 or 10%. So, but I will investigate that as far as fuel.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rasmus.
Just on that note, and I'm thinking Chief Felt, he's not going to speak up on it. But I think the issue there is going to be location. And the sheriff's office, they're going to need to fill up their tanks at places outside of Willmar when they're low. They can't plan on coming all the way back to Willmar to be able to fill up. So the credit card system works for them. And also because they're transporting all over the state. And the same thing's going to apply for the state patrol. So as far as fuel, I just can't see that working.
And you can do it both ways, and I've had, vehicles that travel, ambulances, for example. I ran an ambulance service, and half the time they filled up in Kansas City, and half the time they filled up at home. So we had it both ways.
Okay, so we're not seeing any dramatic changes on the revenue side from what was presented. You do have some things, and I'm not sure how you're going to address these 6 items, Mr. Holland. Are these going to be added in on when we approve this, or are we going to do those amendments at a different time, or what are you guys talking about wanting to do here?
Go ahead, Steve. These are some changes and amendments, but I'll let Steve address this.
The first few items there, Mr. Mayor, are a routine maintenance or operational requests that the administrator has forwarded onto my office. The last 3 items are more capital or capital-orientated. If the council remembers, I believe the R22 project, the very last item on the Civic Center, the council set $2.6 million as the capital bonding level. That'll be coming at a future meeting. The legacy grant, we received notification recently that the city's obligation has been reduced there. And the third item of the, I don't have it in front of me right now. The auditorium, that's an updated number that if tuck pointing is the tuck pointing was actually budgeted in 17 for 100,000. If the council remembers, we used 35 for the blocks. Those were the reasons why we recommended that, is because that estimate was given to us at that time. So if you want to include the tuck pointing in 18, that would be the discussion at that point. So they're more capital related. The first three are operating, and I would recommend that we take action to amend those. I believe the administrator is recommending that those be amended. And we'll change if you want those on the December 4th meeting.
Right.
But the last 3 would take more discussion.
So what's the conference room equipment at the fire station? What's that?
I think, Ross, you want to address that real quick?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the conference room equipment at the fire department is actually in the conference room the training room. It was replaced in approximately 2008, and since the last budget meeting in September, we've had several components fail on it, and we felt it was just pretty much time to do a complete overhaul on it, given the amount of usage that the equipment gets.
So going to either the fire chief or the finance director, is there money in the fire department budget to do that this year? Can we do it this year, or can't we?
I spoke to the finance director, and we had explored 2 different options of either using money from the IT budget, since we were under our annual percentage, or doing it as a capital project for 2018. We felt that doing the capital project for 2018 was the better route.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Just exploring that concept of the IT budget, what are you expecting you will be under for 2017 expenditures?
That's a tough guess at this point. For percentage-wise, I can't have an exact number, but I believe we were around 72 to 75% as of October. So we were under that. I should have been about 83%, but number-wise, I don't have that exactly.
And what is your full budget, your annual budget?
As of last year, I believe it was around $330,000. I'm sorry, this fiscal year for 2017.
10% then under.
Mayor Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. The way you make it sound, it probably should be replaced now, or not? And that we don't have any other options to do that without changing it for next year?
We kind of kept a Band-Aid together and limping along. If we did it as a capital project for 2018, it would be done within approximately the first 60 days of the year.
Mr. Mayor, if I remember the conversation, we had given those two options to Mr. Smeby, and it would have taken a budget amendment to amend the capital program for 2017. And so this was, I believe, his choice to go with 18 as a recommended funding source. Could be done either way.
Mr. Mayor. Now, I got a question. Now, when you talk about conference equipment, room equipment, you're not talking like the table, you're talking electronics to...
That's correct. Audio-visual equipment, projectors, the connections for it, the receivers and sound mixers for it. So.
Okay,
Councilmember Rasmus.
so what am I missing here? If you have a budget of 330,000 or ish, and you're only at 80-some %, why wouldn't you have the 12,000 in 2017?
It would be considered a capital purchase, and then that would take an amendment.
I mean, that's
to
what
the
he,
amount.
okay, is that a big deal?
No, it just takes council action. That's kind of the direction that I'm going is, I mean, it's similar to the pages that we had come before us at the last meeting. I mean, these are things that, I mean, you know,
Okay.
normally a budget would have enough room in it to be able to absorb, you know, fire department budget still wrote about 700,000. You know, you'd normally have a $12,000 bounce, but the fire chief is saying he doesn't have that for this year. But according to the numbers that we put together by putting three heads together here, you know, 10% of 300,000 is 30,000, that's over 12,000.
Yep.
And so, you know, we should be able to get that done.
I would have to get confirmation on the exact percentage of what I have left in my budget for this year, though, because that was as of approximately October 31st, November 1st time range, so.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if you remember the presentation, 83% is where it should be at. That does not include the cost for personal services, which will be 100% through the end of the year. So, again, council's past action was that any capital improvement items that were not on the list needed to come to the council for a resolution to amend the budget.
I would just also add that that's almost a full quarter that we're not counting. When he says he's at 83%, that's
Okay.
3 months. We're not just looking at the month
1
of
month
December.
left.
Yeah, we're not looking at just 1 month. So that's a little bit deceiving when he says that, because it's you know, you've still got 90 days of bills. And so he could easily push up to 99% or close to his whole budget.
Okay, so
I just caution everyone when you think about that.
okay. So your feeling is, with knowing what outstanding bills there are and expenditures that are coming up for December, that you will be at your 100% then? That's why it's
Yeah,
not
it's
in-
definitely a possibility, and that's why I felt it was better to push it into a 2018 capital improvement project as opposed to possibly going over my budget for 2017, so.
I would just say this, we will relook it tomorrow, the three of us, we can take a relook and see if we can't find this money. And if so, then we'll take it out of this year's budget. But we need to, I haven't been involved in this conversation, but we will take another look at it.
What I'm seeing from the council is there's a desire to, if the equipment doesn't work, let's get it fixed. The other thing is that if we put it into next year's budget, you can't raise the levy any higher than you already have it. You haven't cut anything yet, so that means that somebody else's equipment's going to get cut. And you got to decide, is the equipment at the fire station more valuable than a gun for the police department? Or a snowplow for public works? Because that's the point where you're at right now. Is either you're going to replace this or you're going to take it from another department. You either have to do it this year or you have to do it next year. Next year, you can't do it in the budget unless because you can't raise the levy any more than you've already raised it.
Thank you, Ross.
Are we going to go through each one?
Well, I think if there's questions, then I think that we need to do it. But either the departments are going to have to adjust their budgets internally, and we can't raise the budget any more than we already have.
What's the
So-
net of these changes here? Is there,
Well, you got 10,000, you got 17,
It's about
17.2.
131,000.
How much?
My math was right the first time, 131,550, but that does not include anything for point number 6.
So at that point, that's the entire 3% levy.
Mr. Mayor, the first four items are operating there would be about 33, a little over $33,000. If you take the 10,000, the Public Works, 7,200 for the compensation study, the 12,000 of equipment in the fire station, and the 4,000 of temporary salaries. You have a reduction of $75,000 in the legacy grant that's also in the budget. So it's the major two items are the auditorium and the Civic Center. And the Civic Center is in the bonding capital programs. It boils down to the auditorium, if you want to do the tuck pointing and increase the allocation for that from the capital.
if we increase that, we need to deduct somewhere.
Right.
I mean, and, did you say there was a consensus for leaving the budget where it is, or?
No, I did not say that.
Okay, I didn't think you did, but I thought you were going there.
No.
Okay, I think it would behoove us to not increase the levy.
Well, we can't increase the levy any more than we already have.
No, I know, but I mean.
I'm cautious at the 3%.
Yeah, we shouldn't increase it at all due to what's coming down the road here with sewer and water and the Green Eagle Lake, and electric rates are going to be affected in the next 2 years also, so.
Okay.
So department heads need to do some work, is what you're telling us.
I mean, trying to do this math in my head, and, Councilmember Schwantes, you said it was 150 something?
131,550.
131,550.
That includes the 12,000 for the conference room at the fire station, so if you take that out.
And 1 point on the levy is 46,000?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Approximately.
Councilmember Nelson.
But I think it's important, though, that we understand the necessity. I'm curious, I'd just like to see us walk through all of them quickly. Public shelter cleaning, are we talking about additional staff?
Mr.
Because
Mayor,
we
these
use
items
the
were
parks?
submitted to me from the administrator's office, so this is the list. I don't know if there are recommendations to approve them or not.
Well, the problem we have is that when these things come to us after the budgets have been submitted, then I don't get a chance to look at them, to vet them, to ask the difficult questions, and they just come in front of us. And then we kind of do this in an open process, which makes it look like we don't know what we're doing. And the concern I have is that, we've already got, and there was not a palette when I presented this of increasing the levy by the 3%, and now we're almost talking about that we have another 3% of needs. So that's a 6% levy increase. And, I don't know that our taxpayers will support that. I'm not sure that I can support that. And, that's why we have a budgeting process, that's why we have deadlines, that's why we have things that are supposed to be in front of us. And it's a bit troubling. So, Councilmember Meske.
I appreciate that we're looking at this particular page, but for me, I guess, this is talking about additional 2018 budget items, and I know we're going to have to talk about that. I guess I was thinking more the point of tonight's meeting was to talk about the 2018 budget, but yet we're starting with the additional items when we haven't even talked about the actual budget. So I just throw out the fact that I think talking about the additional pieces is a little before when we should be talking about the actual budget.
I agree. Councilmember Nelson.
The only other concern I would raise is that for the auditorium, I know we talked about we can't keep waiting and not doing this. We're damaging the building. So I think there's a responsibility that we've got some things that we have to get done also. So, I mean, this is another, almost like a little setback or surprise. And if we keep pushing this down the road, I think we are damaging a historical building. So I don't know how we talk, I agree with what Councilmember Meske said. We haven't even touched the other part of the budget. But I am concerned about some of the things on here and as to why the changes occurred. I'm assuming the legacy grant, did they go back to 25% of what we got, or do we know?
Mr. Holland?
Steve, if you want to address the legacy amount, the question was about that.
Mayor Calvin, members of the council, we wrote a grant to Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission for Robbins Island Park and 3 projects specific to Robbins Island Park, and they were four-season shelter, a storage facility for rental equipment, and an interpretive boardwalk along the eastern waterfront. Our grant was approved, but Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission reduced the award from $750,000 requested to $606,000. At that time that they did that, I asked them the question of whether or not the match stayed at $250,000, and the match did stay at $250,000 from their perspective. When they got approval from the legislature to fund the projects for this year, it got handed off to the DNR, and we're in a process of writing a grant to the DNR to receive that $606,000 in correspondence with them late this fall. They did adjust what Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission said to us about the $250,000 match and reduce that to $175,000, which is the same percentage that they reduced our award. Thus, we've got a $606,000 grant coming forward, and it needed to be a $175,000 match. Staff thought it prudent to leave the $250,000 in there because of the reductions that were already made to the overall scope of the project.
Mayor, if I could say something. Well, I'm not confused. I was going to say I'm confused. I'm not confused. I'm just, obviously, here in Willmar, you do it a little differently. We'll just put it in those terms. These items that are on this list, they don't have to be in the budget. Because it was proposed that, oh, well, this has to be in the budget. He said, well, it came from Mike's office, so I guess it's $10,000. We've got the $7,200 for the compensation study. They don't have to be in the budget. My understanding was, and this is my perspective, so you know where I'm coming from, I've done budgets 90 days out, 120 days out, and then I come back and just like number 2 there, the compensation study, Bridget had told me to put that in the budget. I didn't do it for whatever reason. I forgot. So it didn't make it into the budget. So after that, she said, you know, can you put that in the budget? So that's why that's on there. We don't have to do that. And then the other thing is, the reason I put it on there is if the council feels like it's important, then I find the money, and then I replace it. And the mayor says, well, I hate to, you know, cut somebody else's budget, you know, to provide for this. That's normal for me. I mean, if you want it in the budget, I mean, we've got a certain dollar amount, and then we decide that something else has a higher priority, then I cut it. And if it's a big amount, then I cut something equally big, and I put it off for the next year. That's what the budget is all about, and we'll go through that throughout the year. I think I was talking to someone this afternoon. You know, I had a couple vehicles go out that wasn't expected to go out. They caught on fire, and you don't have insurance money and things like this. You have to come up with the money. So I don't want to give the wrong impression here. We do not. I'm not asking for you to find the money. I'm not asking for you to even approve these. I just ask it for your consideration. Because if there's anything on here that I say is a health and safety thing, I will let you know that there's no doubt we have to have that done. Just like with the fire department, the conference room. That's not health and safety. We don't have to do that this year. We don't even have to do it next year. So that's the way I look at the budget. Health and safety things, yeah, that's a priority, and we've got to get those things done. Everything else is optional, and it's, I present it to you on behalf with our finance director for your consideration. And as I always like to say, I don't get married to any of these things. So I don't cry. If you don't want to have that into the budget, that's fine. So I just wanted to make that clear, Mayor. I understand, you know, your perspective also, but I didn't mean to offend anybody or make it look like that we hadn't thought about these things, because we had. So I just want to put that out.
But today we're dealing with the 2018 budget, and we have to have a balanced budget.
Right.
I mean, you have to have the incomes, have to balance the expenses.
Right.
And so if we're going to consider these,
Right.
then to present a budget, I understand operating a budget's one thing, but submitting a budget, presenting a budget is something totally different. And I understand that we all work within the parameters of the budget. I mean, it's concerning to me that we can't find $12,000 out of this year's budget, out of a $700,000 budget. We can't find $12,000, but if we can't, we can't. I mean, that's your business, not the council's business.
I can find that. I can find that.
So, but at the end of the day, I mean, like council member, I mean, I thought we were coming to talk about 2018 budget, so when we went through all these reviews, I was kind of surprised we did all that. But, I mean, we have to talk about the 2018 budget and the budget we're going to adopt and the levy we're going to adopt. And at the last meeting that we had, that we talked about the budget, there was consensus, to me anyways, that council was not comfortable with the 3% increase in the levy that I had proposed. And so I tried to find some ways to cut that area. So the ideas that I came up with, staff said, no, we can't do that. So it's back to the council. I tried to do that. I tried to work within the parameters that are set up in front of us, and staff told me, no, we can't do that. So that's why it's back to us as a council, Councilmember Nelson, Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ike, for bringing that up and stating it the way you did. I mean, when I looked at the sheet and it said additional budget items to request, I didn't think that shouldn't even be on here, because we have unspent funds. We're not broke. And some of these items, it's just a matter of, do we want to do them or do we not need to do them? These are requests that we can fulfill without putting them in the budget.
Right.
And I would say probably pretty easily, but it's a matter of do we want to do them or not. So I don't think we should consider them as budget items either for 18. I just, they don't need to be.
Okay, let's get to the 2018 budget. At the last meeting, we talked about the 15,000 that comes in from the rents from the tower. You know, maybe one of the things we want to consider as a council, so that that doesn't come back to us every few years, is that we take and tell the finance director that those dollars get applied to the fire department budget. That way the fire department knows that those revenues that come off that Verizon tower go to them. I mean, if we want to do that, we can do that. I mean, I don't think we want to, but, you know, otherwise we'll deal with them as they come up every couple of years, so. Okay, Councilmember Osmus.
I don't know where to start, but I have a lot of little pink tabs. I don't know if we're going to go page by page or how this process works, but one of the things was the $50,000 for the audio equipment at the Civic Center. Has that been taken out? That's, in my paperwork, that's still in here. So that's 50,000.
Well, we
That
have to
was-
pay that, though.
Yeah, that was done, but on the back of the club, so now we have to reimburse them.
Okay, so that stays into 2018.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead, you can go through your list, and then we'll go one by one.
Sorry.
nope, you do your process, and then mine might fall in there.
Our process is that we're discussing it now. This is how we do it.
Oh,
So, yeah,
okay.
yep. So if you have questions, this is where you bring the questions up, and then we have staff here to answer those questions. If you want to go to somebody else, I can, or I can stay with you.
I'll just start with one. On the revenue, starting with revenue in the general fund, licenses and permits. It went way down in 2017. Did we cover that? Why it was like 698,000 in 2016, and then the proposed for 2017 went way down to 396, like almost half. And then 2018, the proposed is 458. What happened? I'm just curious, what happened with licenses and permits that it so drastically got reduced for income?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the licenses and taxes are driven by building permit and the amount of activity of building in the community. The 2016 actual, and maybe Mr. Peterson can talk about what level and what type of projects were built in 16. But as you noticed, we projected a slight increase between 17 and 18 because we anticipate the amount of activity to continue. That line item is kind of driven by the amount of building activity. And so if you jump it up to where you had a big year and you come up short, so we try to ramp that up, but
Right.
it's driven by the amount of building activity in the year. That's the big driver between licenses and permits.
Okay. Just wondering what happened in 2017, that it was so much less, but,
Yeah, 2017 is about on track of where we budget for that activity, and it's based on an average year. And again, I'd have to go back and look at, the last 3 years have been a lot of building in the community. And so at some point in time, hopefully it doesn't drop off. But, I mean, it's better to average that out and keep it at a level that you anticipate it to realistically be.
right. I understand that part and averaging and trying to, but anyway. It didn't quite answer what happened in 2017. We just didn't have very much
2017
building.
Right, 2017 was a projection, it's not an actual. The actual will come in at the end of the year, and then you'll
In
see
the
that extra
October
number.
report, I think we were like $110,000 over what we anticipated for building
Okay.
permit revenue. So
Well,
we
may-
are going to exceed that number again in 17.
Okay,
So that may be a little bit low, and, you know, as in general with, you always, you know, budget your revenues low and your expenses high. So,
Mr. Peterson indicated to me that in 16, why that number is so large is that the
Yep.
school came in 16 and the building permit. So
I figured there was a reason there.
the amount of
Okay,
activity in the industrial park, Magnum Trucking, and some of those other projects will drive that activity as well. Any kind of, you know, some of the activity on First Street.
okay. But, yeah, but then I was thinking we had yeah. Okay. You can go to somebody else. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody else have a question they'd like to ask in regards to the 2018 budget?
Did you give us a balanced budget, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you did have a balanced budget that I did present, and that did show a 3% increase in the levy, and the budget was balanced. The 75,000 coming out, I was not told about that until in the memo on, I think it was 2 weeks ago we got that.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if you're looking at the summary page for the general fund, the reason it may not look balanced is because of the process the council has used for carryover dollars from 2016. Those are factored into available revenues, and they're not shown, they're shown in the fund balance section. If you look at the 1.4, the two designated $16, and you add that to the revenues, it will be balanced.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Erasmus.
for a new council member, this is a learning curve. What, on the, under general government, very last category is non-departmental in the general fund, and it's $1 million. $1 million. What is non-departmental? You had city administrator, mayor, council, assessing, finance, legal, city hall. What's non-departmental? What's included with that?
I'm trying to find the page in the details.
Under the general fund there.
Yep. And it starts on page, and I can give you a brief summary of the larger items in there. It starts on page 37 of your detailed information.
Okay, under general fund?
Yep.
Okay.
Major items in there are insurance pass-throughs, some revenue-neutral items that, refunds and reimbursements where we have to account for the money coming in and going back out. And so we've talked, now that Mr. Holland's here, of they kind of overinflate the revenues and they overinflate the expenditures on the same side. So, but we do have to account for them, maybe breaking those out of the general operating into a in and out type separate account.
Okay.
But those are the two major items on the non-departmental.
Okay.
Insurance deductible is the third major item, those three major ones. Something that can be easily identifiable to a department.
Are you, still more? Keep going.
Sure. Okay. Under, under Recreation Department, we have expenditures of 156,000 under proposed. If we go back to just 2015, we were at 73. So we've like doubled for the community center. What are we spending that 156 on?
One more year, and it was 100.
Yep. We had a,
Steve, do you see that? We've went from the actual of about $80,000 in 2016. 2017, we've
we
proposed
raised it to
about
100.
125, and now we're adding another 30,000 to 156. So the basic question she's asking is, that almost doubled from 2016, the budget out at the community center. I don't know if you can answer that off the top of your head, or can you, Steve?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Major item, if you look at page 78 of the detailed information, is
Under
the
what?
salaries of temporary employees was increased dramatically. I don't know if Mr. Brizendine can speak to that, but it was increased by $31,000
For 2017 as well?
for 18.
Right, but then 2017, it was, there was a proposed increase of 125.
It had,
1,000.
17 over is a position in the regular salaries. There was an allocation. I believe the coordinator out there used to be allocated to a number of different departments. And when that person retired, I believe there's a janitorial position that's allocated there now.
For half days, Monday, yep.
But page 78 through 80 would be the detail on the line item activities there. Major item in 18, again, is the temporary salaries.
So when you say that we're to look for that, that's under,
In the general, behind the general fund tab into the detailed line items.
okay.
And I'm using the top right-hand corner as the page number.
See, I don't have those kind of pages. I have page 9,
Keep going.
and it ends unless it's in the summary of expenditures.
It is
What page again?
page 70, it starts on page
It's in here.
78 through page 80.
It's in these. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay,
And then it says community center.
okay, so that's broke down with, okay.
Does anybody remember where that, those allocations, those employees were moved from? Or were they divvied up, Steve? Is that right? And then it was allocated to the community center? Because it definitely doubled.
The request for that facility was to add a staff person to be on duty at that facility for 2018. So that's why that number was increased.
Can I-
Got that.
Can I ask a question that relates to that?
Councilmember Nelson.
So are we actually going to have someone there other than the custodian in 2018?
That's the intent of the budget request.
Okay. And because I know when we've asked this question before, you indicate that there are FTEs allocated there, but there isn't actually someone physically there. So is this something different than what the allocation process is right now?
Correct. It is putting a physical person out there.
Okay, so then for that increase,
Go ahead.
for that increase in 2017, there was, that when it was bumped up to 125, the hope was to get somebody out there, and then we never did. So are some of those funds still available? Because we didn't put somebody out there.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, any allocation of dollars only stands for the year that it's allocated. So any prior years would not be available. The mayor has been given those numbers and have reappropriated them in the 18 process.
Okay.
Councilmember Nelson.
Just one more clarification. So we're not adding an FTE, we are reallocating existing staff? Or are we adding a position?
The request is to add a position for 2018.
Because I thought that had been denied.
It's in the mayor's budget.
Okay. Maybe I'm thinking of a year ago.
Yeah, a year ago it was proposed, I think you proposed it a year ago to a .5 a year ago, right? And then we didn't approve that, correct? Right.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
You're on a roll, don't stop.
Under engineering, there's 50,000 for a traffic study. Do we have to do that? I mean, is that something we do before we decide what roads we're going to do?
Councilmember Osmus, we don't have to do anything.
What?
That gives us a plan, if you will, into the future.
Sure.
Of what the roads may look like in a pick a radius around the city.
Okay, so is that something we normally do every year? We budget for 50,000 to help us make those decisions?
Nope, that's probably a 10-year plan.
I was just going to ask, is that a comprehensive city plan?
Yep, so
it's
it's like a master plan for streets.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the $18,000 search robot?
You certainly can. I believe that the city administrator and the finance director and I talked about the search robot. Chief Felt?
Just wondering what was the need this year and the explanation and the justification?
Sure. That was put in the capital improvement plan several years ago, and 2018 was picked as a target year, not for any specific reason. But what that, we were looking at with that was that a search robot would be something for a critical incident, a hazardous materials incident, something where you didn't want a person or, risk a canine going into a building to search for a person. You could use that robot. And our intent was to use it jointly with other agencies, allow the fire department to use it, that type of thing.
Mr. Mayor, Chief Felt, is there any other departments in the area? Where's the closest search robot, and how often is it utilized?
Sure. The closest search robot of any type that I'm aware of would probably be the metro area. And, in all honesty, it is something that would be used regularly in training, but it's not a common occurrence for us to use it for incidents around here. If you have it on hand, you can certainly find more uses for it, but I'm not going to try and paint a picture of a weekly use or anything like that.
You've got this figured out. Keep going.
I'll let somebody else go for a while.
Councilmember Nelson.
Just a general question about the special revenue funds. I think in our audit, it talked about, while I understand that these are all here because of council policies or needs, is there any that the council should take a look at as being able to do any kinds of reductions that would help us with our budget?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you certainly can do that. That would be, the mayor and the council's prerogative. Most of the time, the only comments I would have on that is there would be a one-time, basically a one-time type item. Some of the levels and some of those are set or have been set by past councils to give the council time to make those decisions. You may have like 1 year's cash flow, and so that it would give you a budget cycle to have that discussion and make the redetermination. An example I can give you on past history is that the franchise fee, the cable, used to be a special revenue fund. The council looked at it, made it a department in the general fund, then reclassified it to within the IT department, and now has moved it back out to a department in the general fund. If you wanted to dedicate those dollars to a special revenue, I mean, that's entirely the council's prerogative to look at those. The balances are in there, and if you have specific questions, we can certainly address them.
So this thought just comes to my mind, go back to the auditorium and what we're short to do if we don't put that in the budget this year, have we ever done one time, let's just reduce a fund by this amount so that we can do the tuck pointing in the auditorium?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nelson, that's actually being proposed in here for the Industrial Development Fund. I think the mayor proposed to, one of them, reduce the balance and use it for street projects, reducing the fund balance. So that was reviewed and is looked at when we look at, yep. So that would be a possibility. And that can be done as Administrator Holland said, this action and discussion tonight can happen throughout the whole year. The only action on the Monday's meeting that can't be changed at any time was the levy. So we do look at periodic budget amendments when things come up, and we bring it to the council of these are your options, either additional revenues available within the department or capital excesses or fund balances. So we give options at the time. Something would come up that isn't maybe happening at this particular time.
I guess it's just a concern that some of the things that we look at maybe should be a priority, and then we put them off for another year. And so I just was concerned if that's an option or something that we should be looking at sooner than later instead of waiting for another budget year.
That is certainly an option of the council. One of the items that we're working on now with the debt and the Caris Health is that we are possibly going to go out to the bond rating agencies and have discussion, because they will see that transaction and try to get ahead of that. One of the items, there's many items that they ask about, but one of the items is the spend down of fund balances and the intent. And as long as the council and we impress upon them that's a one-time, it's not something that the council is going to be doing continuously, they're somewhat comfortable with that, but it is one item that they take into consideration.
So the monies that were spent to make the improvements to the gun range, the auditorium, those were one-time spend downs that were made out of probably 3 or 4 different areas. And then there was a process put in place to pay those back. And we've got to be getting close to having those paid off.
That has totally been repaid to the insurance deductible fund, and that is now back up to $1 million. But that is certainly an availability that the council can do too, is do temporary loans or those types of uses of fund balances as well.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, you just mentioned spending down some of our funds. That came through an audit, correct? That was a suggestion?
If I remember correctly, the auditors suggested, and the state auditor's office has had targeted for a lot of communities, and each community is different based on their revenue streams and their planning processes. And so the state auditor's office has historically always said that you should have about 50% or less on hand of fund balances of what your annual operating budget is.
Correct. That's actually a state statute, isn't it?
No, it is not.
It is not? It's just a recommendation?
That's
State
correct.
auditor?
That's
Okay.
correct.
And where are we at as far as that funds percentage-wise?
We are at about 100%. A number of those fund balances, as we've talked about before, $1 million on the insurance deductible has allowed us to do things of increasing our deductible, and the actual savings in the premiums, and we had a report to the council, was the savings from that was what was able to build up that reserve and allow the city to do that. There's a couple charter requirements on emergency appropriations. We've had those discussions at what levels they should be. Those discussions can continue. We have a cash flow fund balance in the general operating at $4 million. That is reviewed annually, and with the local government aid and the property taxes of $8 million, you get half of that in June and half of that in December. So you are spending $4 million before you get the money in.
Right.
And so those are the reasons that we've presented to the council, and some of the reasons that the levels that are set.
But the council can spend down those funds anytime they want, actually.
The council can do that, yes,
Yep.
sir.
Councilmember Nelson.
Just clarification, you said we're at about 100%. What did you say the standard was, or
50.
50 or 58?
About 50% is what
50?
historically the auditor has recommended. And it goes back to when Mr. Arnie Carlson was the state auditor. He kind of started that discussion. What cities did at that time, some cities especially were planning to do improvements, and where they would put some monies aside each year up until they were able to do the improvements, and they weren't clearly defining that in their reports, and now you see that as far as restricted, unrestricted, and we've had that discussion. We have a fund balance policy, and that's something maybe the council can go back and revisit, and I would recommend that. And that does set some levels and describes the different types of fund balances and the uses that are allowed.
Can you just convert that just to dollars? I get, when you say 50%, what is the 100%? What's our?
Well, I believe if you have a $14 million operating budget, 50% would be $7 million.
Okay, I just wanted you to verify those numbers. Thank you.
Councilmember Osmus.
Okay, back on expenditures. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, under office services. Back in 2014 and 15, there wasn't anything that was budgeted. Then we're hover around the 10,000 range. For 2018, we are, the proposal is for 31,000. So And I know we talked about that each department went to their own paper, their own pens and all that kind of stuff, but 3 times, what, I mean,
What we're doing, what we wanted to do with that is we wanted to pull that all into one central area so that we could track it as a city, how much we spend on office supplies. So that's the reason. So it
Okay.
got pulled out of everything. So, where Public Works was buying this, we moved it all into one budget is what we did.
Okay.
And that's why you've seen that big spike, because the other departments,
And
you should have seen a decrease in their line items for those.
did we?
I know that in some of them that I looked at, we did, yes.
Some of those we did, Mr. Mayor. Some of those are, in 17 was the first year that we did that, and so we're not having a history of what that actually was. This will allow us, and you'll probably see a request to amend the 18 once we have a full year of history, and what you'll see is that'll be revenue neutral because departmental line items will be reduced and that one will be increased.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And I know you talked about that one before. And then right below that was elections. We went from 24,000, but then again in 2016, it was at 56,000, then it was down to 24,000, and now it's back up to 66,000. So are we, I'm guessing, are we anticipating having to buy some machines, or?
Mr.
It's a general election versus a
That's
off-year
what, every
election.
other year, okay. But it still seems large. Okay.
Councilmember Metzger.
First of all, let me thank all the departments for putting the budget together. I'm assuming that a lot of thought went into those budgets. The assumption on this budget is I see the 3%, that is the assumption of a 3% levy increase, is that correct?
Correct.
And remind me, is it $46,000 per point of the levy?
Approximately.
And so if I'm content with all of the expenditures and revenues here, basically, if there was the discussion about moving the levy, have you prioritized what kind of cuts you would make? Or are you suggesting perhaps taking from funds if someone does not want to do a levy? Do we have that kind of information because I know it's 46,000, if you do no levy, it's 138,000 maximum is what we're talking about on a $17 million budget. But have you looked at the possibility of what you would cut out of that $138,000 if the council did not want or wanted to maneuver that levy from that 3%?
Yeah, I brought up one thing, that was the fuel.
Right.
The second thing that I had another council member talk to me about was the truck. And so I vetted both of those with staff. Staff, both of them said that they needed to stay in. What we heard tonight from our city administrator, the third option that I hadn't considered until he said it, was that we just say we're not going to have a 3% increase and you balance the budget. And then just put it back in his hands to do. I don't think that's a good way to do business. Personally, we haven't done it that way in the past. The council has always presented a balanced budget. In the 18 years that I've been working under budgets here, we've always had a balanced budget that we presented to the council and that we adopted. But we certainly could take and say that we want you to adjust those numbers to have a balanced budget. We certainly could do that. That was an option I had not thought about until tonight, and something that might actually be quite palatable. Because the way we did the budget this time, we've never done it this way before.
Right.
And it's totally new. And we're walking down a new path. And like I said in the introductions, I mean, I'm impressed. I think we've got a great budget. I think we've thought a lot of things, and things that we wouldn't have thought of probably if Mr. Holland wasn't here. This is another option that we can put back on his shoulders and say, Mr. Holland, we hired you to manage the budget, manage it, and he will. I mean, I'm impressed with this budget. This is a top-notch deal, guys and gals and ladies. I mean, the thing of it is that, I mean, Steve, have you put a budget together like this before? I mean, it was kind of fun for me.
This
A
process.
lot less involvement from me.
This process, Mr. Mayor, and I've been doing this for 40 years, is a great process. I mean, this budget, as you mentioned, is different than what we historically have done, and it addressed the capital needs, the operating needs, and the
Future.
and the future of the community. That's correct.
And so, you know, so I mean, and then have Mr. Holland even put another potential solution in front of us. I mean, that's thinking outside of the box. I mean, that's good work.
And Mr.
That's what
Mayor,
we hired him
if
for.
I could just add one comment, I mean, this is a document that is a work in progress and is open to change as we go through and things come up, and it just allows the council time to evaluate and make decisions on those types of issues that may not be present or in front of you today.
So I'll
And
say,
so-
I'm supportive of a balanced budget and for the general fund. I have problems with other parts of the capital we'll talk about. But as far as this is concerned, whatever that number may be, and I'm actually more comfortable with a number there, but a zero I don't understand. But if you can make that work and give me a balanced budget, I can deal with that. I think this is good. So I'm not going to get into the individual lines for me, because I'm thinking this was probably done, hopefully, with a very thoughtful process. I'm not criticizing you at all. but just
I'm
saying-
learning.
Exactly.
Well, you know, and I guess my comment back to that is that, you know, when I had my first meeting with staff, I gave the overall process that I wanted followed and the parameters of it. And then what happened in the past is that there would be a number of follow-up meetings that would happen, and we would kind of crunch those numbers, and we would kind of work that together. And then we kind of came to that conclusion at the end, which was then presented to council. What happened on this budget is that it was presented back to me in a very logical process that was very easy for me to understand. And so I don't even know if I made any adjustments, maybe a couple, but very minor adjustments in those meetings. I mean, you know, in previous years, probably 10, 12, 14 hours of meetings, and I think we maybe had hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, is all we had. So, I mean, we haven't managed the budget yet, but I have every belief that we're going to be able to manage this budget, so. Councilmember Nelson, followed by Osmus.
So I'll just flip the coin over a little bit. So for us to justify a 3% increase in the levy, we need to make sure that we're spending the money on places that they need to be spent. So I'm not, you know, I've done budgets in the past, and I've had to cut money out of budgets where there wasn't a place to cut, and you had to just hold your breath while you did it during the year. I don't want to do that either, but to just say we can not do the levy increase and accomplish the things that need to be done in our community, I'm concerned about that kind of statement with, we'll just live within our budget. Well, there are things we're so far behind on now that if we aren't looking ahead to how we're going to do these things, I think that's our job. So I'm a little concerned with kind of the, well, yeah, if you only have this amount of money, then that's all you have to spend. But there's things in this community that need to be done, and I'm concerned that we are being proactive with where we're at and how we're going to do this. So I think the budget feels more important, that we're doing the right things and that we have the right amount of money to do that. So I'm struggling a little bit with some of the conversations that have gone on because, yeah, if you only have this amount of money, then you don't spend things. But we're behind and there's things that need to be done. So are we justifying or are we doing the right things and being responsible and making sure that the right things get done in our community?
Councilmember Osmus.
I agree with, that was a good part of the conversation with Councilmember Nelson's. I'm just trying to understand the budget process as well. And to me, if we're going to be able to meet some of those needs and the concerns of the citizens, I think we have to go, my understanding is we have to figure out then where we're going to take it from to be able to continue to go forward. And so that's why I'm just kind of going through. And when I looked at some of the numbers and trying to understand it, I looked at things that were really different from year to year. that helped me look, okay, why are we different this year? And so I'm looking for some of those explanations. One of the major thing was in debt service and special assessment funds. And in the years past, in 15, 16, and 17, we had like $5 million. For 2018, we're proposing $4 million. Why are we losing $1 million in revenue?
That's projects, streets.
Isn't that streets?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, in debt service, especially special assessments are driven a lot by the projects that we do in the amount of activity and/or prepayments of special assessments. Example being in 2017, the council asked the question about people and why they're required to prepay before the projects are done. First of all, the projects only have the final lift to be put on. They aren't required to prepay. But in this instance, we had 33 parcels that prepaid assessments for 17 debt service project. So the amount of prepayments drives the revenue sometimes, and so we adjust those numbers. We have a 10-year program that we review and analyze, and so the debt service may fluctuate. We try to even those out because of the 10-year program, and it's probably a discussion for another evening on the whole 10-year street program and how it works and everything. But a lot of that is driven by the amount of activity and what's projections are on the revenues on the debt service side.
Okay, I just thought it odd that for the last 3 years, we were at $5 million, and I thought, did we make a concentrated effort that we were doing less streets in 2018, that we went down $1 million, or what was the justification on that? But
Additional discussions. Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, there's really no need for a 3% increase in our budget. I mean, you've all heard that we're financially conservative. I mean, because of our conservativeness, we're doing really well, the city of Willmar is. And we could probably do a 5% decrease and still do all these programs and still have plenty of money in reserve. So I think we're talking about, we're getting too deep into the weeds here. Staff has done their job, and we can have the balanced budget without doing an increase. The money's there. We've got funds in reserve to do all of this sheet and the 3% that's added that was in the mayor's budget. There's money there to do it. We don't have to raise the levy to do any of this. So I would suggest that we don't, and keep our balanced budget, and if that 3% needs to be spent on what you suggested cutting, we'll take the money from reserves.
Two ways.
I mean that's what they're there for. I mean, we can't just keep piling up money. I mean, 501c3 organizations can only have so much dollars in reserve unless it's for a capital improvement, a new building or something. They can only have it. Otherwise, the tax people will get after them. And we don't need to keep adding to the reserve we have because we're at 100%. We only need, by law or by suggestion of the state auditor, 50%. So there's millions of dollars there, folks. So we don't have to be worried about increasing at 3%. I think let's cut that 3%, and if we think those projects that he cut are we need to do, it's Ike's job to get the money. He'll find it. That's what we pay him for.
Councilmember Nelson.
I struggle a little bit to listen to that, too. I mean, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but why haven't we done the things? Why are we so far behind? Why do we have a roof that's leaking on a historic building? Why do we have other things? The staff did their job putting a budget together with the 3% increase, and we have projects now that we've talked about that aren't in the budget that probably need to be done beside what's in the budget. So, I mean, historically, we've been building reserves. So I'm not saying we shouldn't pay those, but to say we shouldn't do the 3% increase, that's how the staff put the budget together, was with the increase. So I'm a little concerned that we're not being forward-thinking with this whole process. I mean, If we take that, where are we going to, what are we going to cut? And are we going to commit to doing the things that need to be done? Or it's frustrating to hear that we're at 100% fund balance when there's so many things that haven't been done in this community. I'm concerned about how this process right now. I don't know.
Councilmember Metzke, followed by Osmus.
I would agree with some of the things that Councilmember Nelson is saying, but I think a lot of those we haven't talked about yet. As far as the general fund is concerned, I don't know how we're not keeping to what our priorities are as a council. It's when you get to the capital projects, I think where some of those stuff where we're lagging behind that you're talking about, I think our priorities had identified these specifically. You know, when you talk about stormwater and you talk about pavement plants and those things, I think we're definitely lagging behind there. But I don't think we've had that discussion yet about the capital projects. As far as the general fund is concerned that we're talking about, I look at that and I say, I think we've done the due diligence as far as that it's concerned. The discussion about where the levy should be, because we are all over the place, it's one of those things where, yeah, we can decrease it, but you can never increase it. So it's one of those things that I think around the table now at this working session, we're going to agree to disagree where that level needs to be set, but I don't think we have to set that final levy here today, is my understanding, is that you can go forward with this on the next meeting at a 3% and know that we're going to have more discussion about where that needs to be. But as far as the general fund is concerned, I'm comfortable with the process that you've explained that you've gone through and where you have it set. I think the harder discussion of where that's going to ultimately end is big. But I would say, I think when we talk about our priorities, that's still coming as far as the capital projects. 'Cause I totally agree, we have lagged behind, and we've had those discussions. We know where we're lagging behind, and where we catch up is in that part of the budget. And when we talk about the part that we're going to present next time, is it the entire thing with the capital included in that conversation? We don't need that number for the next meeting, right?
No, so what we need to do on the 4th or the 18th, we have to adopt the levy, what the levy amount is. I'm sorry, we have to adopt the budget and the levy. We have to adopt both of those. And so you either adopt the budget and the levy as it's presented, or you adjust that. This budget that we prepared, I think the mayor did a little bit of work on that too. I know you understand that. That was meant to come across more jovial than it did. But anyways, so what I did is I took the information that you gave me at the retreat, I put that implemented into this budget, and that's what the direction I gave staff, and that's what we came back to you. So you see the west side of town, the stormwater getting addressed. You see the issue getting addressed down by Menards. You see some of our facility needs being addressed. Those are the capital things. And we can have those conversations down the road, but we have to adopt the budget so that so staff knows what to work on.
Right.
And so, and to Councilmember Nelson and Councilmember Christensen's point both, is that on $150,000, and I'm rounding the money up, but on $150,000, when you're talking about $8.5 million for a city hall, and you can say, okay, we're only going to spend $803,000. I mean, $803 million, and then you made up your 3%. So, $8,300,000. I'm sorry, $8,300,000. So, yeah, I think when we start talking about the capital, that's when we get down to the nuts and bolts, right?
That's the big numbers.
Yeah. Councilmember Osmus Christensen.
So that's where I was going to go next, was we haven't discussed, we were going to get an update on the possibility for a new city offices. And I guess, and I guess I'm not clear, when you say that we're going to vote on the 4th or the 18th to accept the budget, then how do we, if we don't get through into the weeds and we don't fine tune some of these items, how do we say we approve it then?
Well, you approve the budget in concept.
Got it.
And then you manage the budget through the year. I mean, we've heard from our finance director, we've heard from our city administrator tonight, that the budget is a fluid document.
Yep.
And I mean, we did some of that at the last retreat. We had monies we approved earlier in the year, and we came back and said, no, we want to go this direction instead. And so that's kind of how you do that. That's kind of how you go through the weeds, if you will, a little bit.
Okay. So when do we get the update on the possible city office building to put that into the budget?
So it's in the budget currently.
Right.
But I believe staff is going to bring that back either the 4th or the 18th. I don't know what date you have.
Oh, I thought we were
Decided on that.
discussing that tonight.
No, we're not
Oh,
discussing
okay.
that tonight. No. It's either the 4th or the 18th.
In December, we will be giving a briefing in some different options,
Okay.
including basically rough prices and costs and so forth in different locations and all that. So that's something we've been working on for the last couple of months.
And so, I mean, I had a question earlier today, are we only looking at the hardware Hank building? No, what they'll be bringing us, Mr. Peterson and Mr. Holland have been working on this. They'll be bringing us a lot of different options. You can do it here, you can do it there. It will cost this if you do it here, it'll cost this if you do it there. And that's what they're tasked with at this point. That's what the direction they were given after we met that night and came back here, is to explore the options. And so I had one meeting with them and an architect a month ago, and so they're fine tuning that and going to bring that back to council for decision. I mean, you may come out and say, no, we don't want to do a city hall at all. And then, the budget adjusts accordingly. Councilmember Christensen, followed by Meske.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The budget can be changed any day of any month in 2018. Don't believe it when somebody comes and says, we're going to spend it because it's in the budget. We can say, hey, listen, we're going through tough times, or whatever the case may be, have a storm and it costs us a lot of money. We can say, well, we're going to cut 5% of every budget. We can do that. Another reason I don't like the 3% increase, it isn't major, and we have money to cover those expenditures. But I've said this before, and think about it. At every level of government, every dollar the government takes out of the private sector, every dollar means that our economy is affected. The people can't buy a certain amount of groceries or a new car or whatever. And we pay a lot of money in taxes, city, state, federal, and every fee that we get is a tax. Every dollar you take out of the private sector means I can't pay my guys another 50 cents an hour or $1 an hour. That's a fact. Every dollar they take out of the private sector, and all governments at all level are taking money out of the private sector left and right. And hopefully they're going to change the tax laws at the federal level to give us some relief. But keep that in the back of your minds. Every dollar that the government takes out of the private sector means that somebody can't spend that dollar somewhere else. And wages are way, way behind these days, folks. That's another subject, but.
Right, we won't get into that tonight.
But it has to concern us, any increase in the levy, and that's why I say we can do it without the 3% increase. And staff has done a good job. They've got a good budget here, as the mayor stated. It's a good budget.
Councilmember Meske.
I just want to, just a word of caution of it. We've talked about before, I don't know what we'll hear about city hall buildings, but we had talked about combinations of city halls with community centers, and we had said that we were going to seek the public's opinion on what they want to see in a community center. And so when you put a price tag on a community center combination thing, I'm a little skeptical on that piece, so just know I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about public input, because we want that. Because I don't know what the public wants as far as a community center is concerned, but that's one of the things that I know I haven't seen the survey come out, so I'm a little skeptical about how that process will work.
Right, and I think what staff is waiting for is to get some additional direction, and then, the city administrator has assured me that there will be plenty of opportunity for public input, so we will make sure that happens.
That's correct. And any, facility like that, I always seek input on that, and, just like when we do the city hall, the design, every department will be involved in that, and I've already started that process. And then, I went down to the community center, and I've spent a couple of days down there and observed, formally and informally. And, that's the beginnings of it. And, I was in Alexandria a couple of weeks ago, and, that's all I did was look at buildings, their fire department, their black street lights downtown. It was beautiful. Anyway, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you. I just want to note that I really appreciate the work and effort that went into this budget, and I agree completely with what others have said, and that it really reflects our priorities and our values. And kudos to folks for making that happen. So I support the budget as it stands. I would like to honor the work that has been done. In regard to the 3% increase, I think that's actually a very reasonable increase in today's world. When I travel throughout the region that I work with, it's not uncommon for the counties to be seeing a 6 and 7% increase in their property taxes and their levies, I should say. And so I do believe that 3% is very realistic. I think perhaps not tonight, but it would be interesting for us to have a discussion on what our philosophy is in regard to the reserves that the city holds. My personal thought is I would rather see us use those for something that's going to make a large impact and not for operating types of funds. And but I think that we do have a large reserve, and I am a little bit uncomfortable with us sitting on dollars that aren't being put to use when we have so many needs. Having said that, I also don't want to not take advantage of the increase to pay for what I see in this particular budget. I'd rather use those reserves for an extra $2 million that gets added onto the $8.5 million or whatever. I mean, I think we can find plenty of uses in this budget, so.
Okay. One of the things that was talked about at the last council meeting was to give staff an opportunity. I think Mr. Okins had mentioned the fact of maybe having some community forums. And so if, I don't see us being ready to vote on this on Monday. And so I think we should push it off to the 18th. And if we want to go out and do some community updates, we can do that. Council, if you want to do more in-depth discussion on any particular piece of the budget, we need to have those discussions, but we need to know what those questions are. We asked a lot of good questions tonight. I think we got a lot of good work done. We've been here for quite a while. But I don't see that we're going to be ready for Monday night to approve the budget. Do I have consensus on that?
Same with the Eagle Lake sewer system, right? That's going to be the 18th instead?
What I said was the 18th is what I said to the city administrator. Right. Right. So.
What do people need between now and then to be able to make a decision?
Yeah, that's what I was.
To postpone it for that long a period of time, are we going to be any more ready on the 18th than we are on the 4th or whatever?
So what, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what else do we need from staff so that we're prepared to make a decision? Because, Mr. Holland will be putting that agenda together for Monday night for the work session.
2 days.
And that's got to be, he's got to have that done by Wednesday, and then he tweaks it on Thursday. So if there's specific things that you want from him, you need to let him know so that we can get that. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think that has to be the most efficient and effective way to go about doing things, because if we sit here as a body but looking at all these individual little pieces, we'll be here for hours and hours and hours. We have a system in place that's worked up to this point, and I think that if we have individual concerns about individual areas, we need to bring those concerns where they need to be brought to, so it can be worked out into a plan that can be presented to us as kind of a cohesive thing, rather than something that we're just going to get back into. I don't see how that's effective. I want to see a package brought rather than a box of Legos that we got to all sit around the table and put together. It doesn't work.
Okay, Councilmember Nelson.
I'm just curious if our finance director has any thoughts on community input and out of respect for that, the assessment group and the comments that were made before. I guess, I feel like we've had enough questions around here. I don't know if we're ready to do this, but Councilmember Plowman's suggestions, if we're not going to do the 3% increase, then I'd like to see what we're going to do different in the budget. And I am concerned about some of the things that are in the capital improvement program, and I do think they affect the budget. And we haven't talked about those. And so if I have to make a list of those to send in, kind of thing, but I'm just not sure how we're going to gain some additional knowledge. So I don't know, Mr. Okins, if you had some suggestions, because you made the comment the other night that you were interested in doing that. So do you have thoughts that could be done within the next couple of weeks?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nelson, the comments the other night were just kind of an expansion of what Councilman Osmus had said about the history that what we had done here in the community on the COPS meetings and the budget meetings that we had a number of years ago. We used to do a live broadcast. Some of those things, because of participation, I think have gone away. And I guess I was just telling the council and the mayor that, as staff members, I think we're always open to do whatever the council and the mayor want us to do as far as meetings and explaining things to the general public and to the council, either, directly in our offices or out in the community. We want to educate the public as much as possible.
Well, I know we have Rudy back here, and he runs the RAC 8. I'm sure that, you get together with Rudy and put a show on there. Would there be space there, Rudy? Plenty of room. Okay. Councilmember Alvarado, followed by Christensen.
Yes, I was going to ask our finance director, has anybody approached you about getting together with you to talk about concerns over the budget?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Alvarado, I mentioned in my opening remarks that I had those two questions from council members. That's the only contact or questions I've had either from the council or the public on the budget.
Thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this being recorded live now, or is it going to be
Tape delay.
tape delayed so that the public can see this? It's always tough to get the public involved. I mean, it really is, but we owe it to them to do this on the 18th instead of the 4th, so they can, I don't know when he's going to replay it, this week, next week, probably. Might get a couple questions. I know I'm going to go out and ask some people about it and tell them what we talked about this evening, and why rush into it? Why push it? I mean, the 18th, we're going to have a budget.
Yeah, we have to either have it the 18th or call a special meeting just to deal with that, but I'm certainly quite convinced we can get it done on the 18th.
Oh, sure.
Finance Director Okins.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just a technical procedural that I could help the council out is that the truth and taxation notices went out with the hearing set for December 4th. The hearing has to be held on December 4th, but a continuation hearing to the 18th can be done at that hearing on the 4th. But that's just technically how you have to handle that. So you can still do final action on the 18th, but you still have to continue it from the 4th.
Right, so we have to take public testimony that night. Right, I forgot about that. You told me that before. Sorry about that. Anything else for the good of the order? So what I'm hearing, Mr. Holland, that we want for next week is an overview of the capital. Is there a specific question about capital that you want addressed? Or just an overview on capital? What I heard is that we want more information on capital. Did I hear that incorrectly?
I would like to have how the public will be solicited for their opinions on certain pieces, such as a community center and perhaps even involvement in the amphitheater pieces that were on there, because we have talked about those before as we wanted public input. So for me, I would like to know how we are going to do that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that for the update for the 4th, we want a process on public engagement for the amphitheater. I'm assuming you're talking about all improvements at Robbins Island that'll be considered, the parks, City Hall, Community Center, just on how we're going to gather that data. So, and I'm sure if you do one, it's going to be pretty much copycat for the
That's the good thing. That's the good thing. It's all going to be pretty much the same method. I'm smiling because you started listing off like 6 things, and I was like, wow. But no,
Would you like more?
no, I think we've got a full plate for next year, and you know, I do have a set process on, you know, gathering public information, and you know, I go on the radio every couple of weeks and I talk and get out in the public and I talk, and I go to the Rotary meeting and I talk, and you know, you try to gather all that type of information informally, and then there's a couple formal methods. But then, you know, I never forget that with each project, there's some, you know, unique stakeholders that you need to reach out to and get that information. The users, you know, that's a very important group. It's amazing. Sometimes people build things and they don't even discuss it with the users. So I can prepare something like that and give you my approach and tell you what I've done in the past, and maybe even talk about real briefly, I don't want to bore anybody, but what's been successful and what's failed.
And I think we want to hear from staff on that too, from each of their projects. Councilmember Nelson.
Just clarification though, just to be careful with the grant, I think we need to be specific with what we applied for and what was approved, so that we're not looking for, I mean, there are requirements for that, so I think to make sure that the community is aware of what the grant, what we received the grant for and what the plans are, so that it isn't just something that we can change, if I understand correctly. And I appreciate the comments that you made. I'm hoping to get more of a one-on-one engagement regarding community center than just us out talking to people and gathering information. So something that's interactive, I think, and I think we heard that in that community assembly project too, about making sure that we are engaging and having one-on-one activity. So.
Okay. Council, anything else that you want to talk about the 2018 budget? So the only thing that's going to be coming back to it, Councilman Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had several calls about the brush site and it being closed with all the nice weather we had. There've been people out there Saturdays and Mondays wondering why it was closed. One guy was at the gate calling me, and he said, there's 4 people behind me, and they're wondering why we can't get in and dump our leaves, because we've been out raking leaves. Is there a reason why we couldn't do that since the weather's been so nice? I know the website says it's closed on October 31st or something like that, or November, but there's been a lot of people out doing early fall chores in the late fall, and it's, again, we're supposed to be the servant to these people, and it might be worth announcing that it's going to be open on Saturday if it's a nice day.
It kind of reminds me of golfers on Christmas Eve, and you know, you get some warm spell. Why isn't the golf course open? But I know that we've, you know, had a policy, and you know, we had a little incident when I got here in August, I want to say, and we're trying to make improvements so that we are flexible and use our Facebook page and radio station, that when we do have breaks in weather, I mean, what a fantastic day today, right? It's one of the best temperatures. I don't know, Sean, if you have anything to add to that.
The only thing I would add is that since we use part-time staff to have someone out there when it's open, you know, we get their schedule to them, and that schedule's set in advance, and we have no idea what the weather might be like. We could be, you know, 10 below zero and 2 foot of snow on the ground right now instead. So, yeah, being flexible is one thing, but finding the staff to say, will you come back and work another day, you know, may not be as easy as them setting their schedule. So, and we can look into some options and see what we can do. But the other thing to always consider is if they're out there and Public Works staff is got it open for whatever we're doing, people can use it. But we're not going to just have it open without someone out there.
Well, we aren't plowing snow, so I would think maybe somebody might be available, you know, to staff it. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be happening if we had 2 feet of snow on the ground and ice and all that. So that was brought up to me, so I just thought
Okay, well, staff will look into it.
Yep.
Okay, so The only thing that's going to get talked about then, so let me encourage you, if you have a specific question about a specific item on the agenda, get to that staff member, make sure and keep our city administrator involved, so if you're going to go meet with the department director, please let the city administrator know you're going to do that. And other than that, we're